didn't see you. I was just looking at my painting of the Liberty Bell behind me. Welcome to the latest edition of Ask George with me, your host, George Washington. Now this week, Mrs. Keiper writes to me and tells me that you're about to learn of the Committees of Correspondence, a great time for communication during the colonial era of America. Before we do anything, though, we do have some code words, so I hope you have your highlighters ready. Let's talk about what these words mean. Your first word, committees. A committee is a group with a common purpose, so it makes sense that committees, plural, are groups with a common purpose. If you were on a student committee, you would meet with other students to talk about interests and things that you're trying to do for the school. Correspondence is communication, usually through mail. At this time, we're talking about old school snail mail, paper, pen, ink. Obviously, we're not talking about email. Now, in the 1700s, 1760s, 70s, 80s, communication is extremely slow because you had couriers on horseback, maybe by boat. To send a message between the colonies, between towns, could take 2, 3, even 4 weeks, depending on which colony you were trying to reach and where you're coming from. So back then, people decided we need a better way to communicate with the other colonies. How are we going to do that? Now, at the time, you have a very progressive, very forward-thinking rebel group of patriots known as the Sons of Liberty. I know you've heard about these people before. They're the ones who are tarring and feathering those pesky tax collectors, right? Now, the leader of this group, his name is Samuel Adams, my boy Sam. Now, A-D-A-M-S, that's how you spell his last name. Again, it's Sam Adams. And Sam Adams is the guy responsible for establishing and founding the first Committee of Correspondence. His idea, once again, was to establish a different way that multiple colonies could communicate with each other. Eventually, many more committees were quickly formed throughout the different colonies. And the purpose or the aim of these committees was pretty simple. It was just to share information about each new issue that the different colonies faced, whether that was common needs and wants, concerns, problems with taxes, etc. The main point was that all of the colonists were starting to feel a little bit of tension with King George III. You know this, right? We just fought a French and Indian War. I feel like I did a pretty good job on that, leading that militia on that French fort. But, King George, still taxed us. The Sugar Act, the Stamp Act. Even when he repealed the Stamp Act, he still drew that proclamation, right? That giant bogus line down the Appalachian Mountains. Rubbed people the wrong way, if you know what I mean. So the Committees of Correspondence was really the first attempt that the American colonies took to maintain communication with one another. Many think that it was highly important that the colonies established lines of communication with each other so that they could form bonds between one another. The 13 colonies kind of united in the idea that, they could come together to solve problems and not depend on the king. This would help them later cooperate in the American Revolutionary War. Right? Now, the relationship between the colonies and England was falling apart quickly, as I just discussed. So eventually, each one of the 13 colonies created their own Committee of Correspondence. And the types of news that they would share was all different kinds of information. The latest and greatest from that colony, exciting news, things that might attract people to come to that colony, but it was also any concerns or problems, like I said, about the British Crown. The news about what one colony was doing would travel to the next, which would inspire more revolution and more change, and most importantly, more independent thinking. And these are all things that came together to, of course, spark that kind of catalyst road that we've been talking about on the way to the Revolutionary War. Right? So to recap, in short, the Committees of Correspondence were groups of people that eventually were established in each of the 13 colonies, and the goal of this was to discuss ideas for change, for ways to kind of push out and resist the British and their unfair policies, and to really unite together. Okay? If you have any questions, I'm sure Mrs. Keiper will be able to answer them. And until next time, This has been Ask George, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.